It's Wednesday, May 22. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. NWC says a deficiency in the supply of water owing to drought affecting sections of the island has forced increased conservation measures. Jamaicans are prohibited from doing the following activities: irrigation and watering of gardens, lawns, grounds and farms, refilling or supplying of tanks, ponds, or swimming pools, and or for use other than normal domestic services such as drinking, cooking, washing, bathing and sanitation. Washing of vehicles by use of hose is prohibited. Watering or washing roadways, pavements, paths, garages, or outrooms. Any purpose which may require the use of a considerable or excessive quantity of water. The NWC says the restrictions will remain in place until further notice. The National Water Commission says a breach of these restrictions will result in a fine or 30 days imprisonment. Prime Minister Andrew Holness addressed the lower house of Parliament yesterday, informing them about measures being implemented for water security across the island.
This prohibition affects 90 water systems right across Jamaica, and the NWC will be publicizing those systems so that our citizens will know the areas that are under prohibition. I'm using this medium to appeal to Jamaicans to conserve and to comply with the prohibition. Mr. Speaker, the present water shortage is not a situation where the government, by virtue of any capital expenditure, can bring immediate solutions. We can bring temporary solutions by providing the trucking of water and tanks for storage. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm now announcing an additional $100 million for trucking of water and the distribution of tanks to be allocated for the parishes that are declared to be affected, which will be Kingston and St. Andrew, Portland, St. Mary, and St. Elizabeth.
Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries Minister Audley Shaw has called for an increase in Jamaica's productivity index so that the country's economy can remain on a growth path. He noted that productivity is an issue that we have to confront more directly in a more focused way. Speaking at the opening of the Organization Development Transformation Conference at the Spanish Court Hotel in Kingston yesterday, Shaw emphasized that as employment increases, production must keep pace with that growth so that citizens can access improved services. He told the participants that while Jamaica has seen a decline in productivity, other countries are seeking monumental growth in productivity using technology. The minister emphasized further that a key pillar in transformation for Jamaica and the solution to Jamaica's low productivity output must be the correct matching of skills and talents within organizations, as well as the strategic and prioritized training of workers. Justice Minister Delroy Chuck is urging Cabinet to amend an existing law that would allow convicts who've abandoned criminality for an extended period of time to have their records expunged.
Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Justice continues to offer these expungement services to persons who have made a sincere and successful attempt at becoming law-abiding citizens so that they're given the opportunity to start afresh without being haunted by their past mistakes. In the last fiscal year, Mr. Speaker, 1,915 expungement applications were received and 1,046 criminal records were expunged. Mr. Speaker, this is the opportunity for Jamaicans to be given a second chance to make a positive contribution to society.
In the meantime, Minister Chuck reported to the House of Representatives on Tuesday that there are more improvements in efforts to reduce the significant backlog in criminal courts. The Justice Minister says the government is committed to giving Chief Justice Brian Sykes the resources necessary to make the country's justice system first class.
To begin with, Mr. Speaker, we're building first-class justice facilities. We have moved swiftly to correct some of the structural deficiencies which have existed in the justice sector, and I can confidently report that significant progress has been made. In the last fiscal year, we spent $1.3 billion to construct, rehabilitate, and refurbish 43 justice institutions, including several of the island's courts.
Former Petrojam General Manager Floyd Grindley unilaterally approving $40 million worth of contracts for the planning of the refinery's 35th anniversary activities, despite protests of his public relations officer. That information came out during Tuesday's sitting of Parliament's Public Accounts Committee, PAC. PAC Chairman Mark Golding brought up the matter.
In February 2017, the General Manager gave the Public Relations Officer the names of 3 companies, including Main Event Entertainment Services, to invite to bid for the Public Relations Consultancy Service contract. Upon verifying the eligibility of the recommended companies on the National Contracts Commission website, only Main Event was found to be eligible. So he submitted 3 names, 2 of which were ineligible. 1 was eligible, based on the National Contracts Commission website data. 4 other companies from the National Contracts Commission website were obtained and presented to the General Manager as possible alternatives that could be invited to tender. The General Manager verbally instructed the PRO, which is the Public Relations Officer, and the Head of Procurement in a conversation on the evening of Friday, February 24th, 2017, to utilize the direct contracting methodology and engage Main Event as a PR consultant. The PR officer confirmed this conversation by email. The decision to proceed with direct contracting was that of the then General Manager, Floyd Grindley.
However, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Energy, Carol Palmer, was stumped as to an explanation and instead deferred to Petrojam's Public Relations Officer, Latoya Pennant.
It is virtually impossible for me to speculate what was going on in the General Manager's mind because the documentation provided doesn't give you any hint, except so far as this committee would have seen, this is the second occasion on which the chairman, the general manager, in his wisdom, dictated how the procurement should be done against the advice of his staff.
She confirmed the series of events, including Grindley's unilateral decision.
We had a conversation, a telephone conversation, where it was myself and I guess if you look at the time of the email, so it was late evening, and myself and the procurement head was at the office when he made the decision, when he sent us he told us to go ahead with Main Event. While we could have executed the events internally, I think where the value to some extent that Main Event probably offered was because we were also tied up with our day-to-day activities, and so they provided some sort of support there in getting some of these tasks done while we executed our day-to-day activities. So they did provide some value, but yes, it could have been done by the committee.
But she also admitted that, in her opinion, the company could have handled the matter internally. The Wigton Wind Farm initial public offering shares is expected to begin trading on the main market of the Jamaica Stock Exchange today. Over 31,200 applications were received for the Wigton Wind Farm IPO, which closed on May 1. Lead broker for the IPO, Mayberry Investments, says the offer was oversubscribed as $14 billion was raised. This was almost 3 times more than the $5.5 billion that the company initially sought. Wigton Wind Farm Limited, incorporated in April 2000, is a subsidiary of the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica. Located in Rose Hill, Manchester, the wind farm currently has 3 plants. The company's main objective is to facilitate and promote the use of wind and other alternative forms of energy to drive the diversification of Jamaica's energy mix. Since becoming operational, Wigton has reduced national oil consumption by close to 406,000 barrels, which has saved Jamaica almost $3 billion. At least 4 people have indicated an intention to enter the race to replace Ronald Thwaites as the People's National Party's standard bearer in Kingston Central when delegates vote on Saturday, June 22. The PNP's executive committee yesterday gave individuals interested in the seat until Friday to formally announce their interest to the party's general secretary. A draft voters list is to be presented to the candidates next Monday. But before that, the aspirants will have to face the party's Integrity Commission and must be cleared before they're allowed to enter the race. Thwaites has not formally announced his intention not to contest the next general election. However, the PNP has confirmed that he will not. Last year, the PNP's former representative for St. Andrew West Rural, Paul Buchanan, indicated his desire to replace Thwaites in the constituency. Opposition spokesperson on health, Dr. Dayton Campbell, has bashed the plan announced by the Ministry of Health and Wellness to outsource some non-emergency surgeries and diagnostic tests to private contractors to ease the burden on public health facilities. Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton recently announced the plan, explaining that where a service could not be accessed at a public health facility, the government would pay for patients to undergo those tests and surgeries privately in a bid to reduce waiting times. It's part of a broader plan to use $1 billion to fast-track the provision of diagnostic tests and surgeries in the public health sector.
To my knowledge, the Ministry of Health has a MOU with the providers of diagnostic tests in place already. The expansion of this aspect is welcome. However, the grey area is in the provision of surgical services. Mr. Speaker, there are ethical concerns.
The opposition spokesman also questioned what incentives doctors would have to work in the public system if they could get higher rates in the private sector.
Will the same doctors in the public sector be the ones to do the surgeries in the public-private partnership? How do we ensure that the people are not channeling the hospital work into their private practices? How will the post-operation care be carried out? When these surgeries are done, will these patients be sent to the public ward? Mr. Speaker, the government is on a campaign to divest all sectors. Is this happening in health too?
Dr. Campbell suggested instead that the government invest the money in improving public facilities. A new batch of 113 farm workers will take up employment opportunities in Canada this week under the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program, the SAWP. A total of 102 workers are returnees and will be deployed mainly to farms in the Ontario region of Canada. They will depart the island Wednesday. The program, which is part of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security's Overseas Employment Program, involves contractual agricultural workers who are recruited to meet the short-term demand of manual labour during planting and harvesting seasons. Here are the top stories making the news across the region.
Can't treat this as some vote of confidence in the UDP. This is a standalone thing. This had to do with going to the ICJ, and the majority of people are sensible enough to agree that that's what we needed to do. Undoubtedly, politics being what it is, we have gotten what you call, sir, a referendum bump. But we fool ourselves if we think that that means we could go to the public and say, general elections, let's use that bump to try and propel us into a fourth term. No, sir, it wouldn't happen, and I would not be fool enough to even contemplate such a thing for all the reasons I've said. So, no, man, we proceed in the normal course, and I believe that we're looking at elections as scheduled in November of 2020.
In sports, we kick off with news from football. It's official. The Professional Football Association of Jamaica is to be dissolved and replaced, and is to be replaced by an interim board. This comes after months of deliberation and consultation between the Jamaica Football Federation and the Premier League Clubs Association. According to JFF General Secretary Dalton Wint, the decision has been long in coming, and they thought the time was fitting to implement some of the suggestions that came out of the meetings between the JFF and members of the PLCA. He said they will look to form a new organization to administer the operations of the Red Stripe Premier League, adding that they will also look at developing and improving the new structure over time. And in athletics, 2011 World 100 meters champion Johan Blake has been added to the list of elite athletes to compete at the fourth staging of the Adidas Racers Grand Prix on Saturday, June 8th at the National Stadium. Blake clocked a season's best 9.98 seconds in May, which puts him in 8th in the world this year on the IAAF rankings. And that's the news on PBCJ. Thanks so much for watching.